I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to the CSRM Tuesday Talk, a monthly roundtable discussion covering a range of relevant topics in ministry and current events. Let's join Dr. Greg Linville, Dan Stoffer, and Greg English as we hear from international experts in the fields of sports, recreation, and fitness ministry.
Well, welcome everybody to another CSRM Tuesday Talk. We're excited today because much like last month where we talked about e-games, we're going to talk about kind of a different angle maybe for your sports ministry as we talk about fantasy sports. If you're anything like me, maybe you've been a part of this. They have exploded the last 20 years or so. It's a big part of a lot of sports fans' lives and what they do. But how can they fit in a local church sports ministry strategy? We're excited to really talk about this. And so I want to introduce today's conversationalists. Actually, I'll ask them to introduce themselves so we can hear from them and where they're located, and we will go from there. So Andrew, why don't you kick us off? Tell us where you are, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Andrew Fouts. Most of you are used to seeing and hearing me on here. I'm one of the producers for the show. I'm work with CSRM as the Director of Digital Resources. And then I also run Ministry Misfits, which is kind of a sister brand to all of this. And currently we're in Canton. So
good stuff. It's always good to have you. You do a great job with CSRM and excited to hear from you here today. And then next on my screen, at least, Ryan, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ryan Wolfe. I am the president at Ability Ministry. We are an equipping organization that helps churches start or advance disability ministries. So that's what I do. I've got previous background working in the local church and love sports. Dan and I grew up same high school, same church, played football at the same high school. So long history, and we've done fantasy sports together for about 20 years. So excited to talk about this today.
I have lost many a Super Bowls in our fantasy league to Mr. Ryan Wolfe. So this is kind of bittersweet for me. So thanks for being here. And then last but not least, Andre, tell us about yourself.
All right, I'm at Eastpointe Christian Church in Blacklick, Ohio. I'm the youth and sports pastor and have been here for almost 7 years now. And I've been doing fantasy sports. You know, I can remember even in high school, me and a couple buddies picked some guys up, and I didn't know what it was, but I made it work, and we kept score with all these guys that we picked up. And I can't remember how I did. I probably did terrible like I do every year, but it was fun. I'm a stat geek from the earliest ages I can remember. But yep, Eastpointe Christian Church in Blacklick, Ohio.
And I've always appreciated how Andre has worked in fantasy sports in his strategy. And Andre, I can relate. I remember being a part of the same league that Ryan mentioned. When we first got started, our commissioner had to add up points with a calculator, we think, every Monday. So it's changed a lot for sure.
And by the way, that was the only championship he ever won, is when he tallied it by hand. So it's a bit suspect.
Yes, for sure. So
pre-computer age.
Yeah, things have improved for sure. Well, guys, I think it'd be great for us just to kind of start off. I'll ask this first question, and then Greg will fire some out as well. But I think
Dan, I first just want to chime in for a moment. Fantasy for me was a paper triangular football on a table. You used to slide it along and hold up the goalpost. And we kept score very simply with a piece of chalk and a board. And then the funny thing about fantasy sports has grown so much. The first time I did it was baseball, and you had to do it every single day. And I'm like, and I was living overseas at the time with, sports ministry. And I was like, man, this is crazy. And then my lineup. I was 8 hours ahead of where we were in the States, and I couldn't get my lineup straight. It was a debacle. And finally, my wife said, you know what? Why don't you stop playing and let me take over? And she did it for years. I quit playing.
Absolutely. That the baseball fantasy is definitely something that can take a very, very long time. It's a long season. You got to stay on top of that for sure. So things have certainly changed. To even think about implementing this into your sports ministry as a strategy might be brand new for some of you. Maybe some of you are already doing it. Maybe you're just here to kind of listen in and see if you should do it. And I think the first question we should ask for anything related to sports ministry is it biblical? And so I just want to kind of open it up. Can we defend this biblically from your perspective? And I want to mention a quick resource on this that kind of walks you through a great process. It can be found in one of our CSRM books, A Theology of Competition. And we just want to encourage you to maybe check that out if you haven't already. But it's got a great template to kind of think through anything that you want to implement, because we want to make sure that it is biblical. So let me kind of open it up to our conversationalist, or whoever wants to dive in first. Are fantasy sports biblical, and should we include them in our sports ministry?
Dan, do you want me to walk through the steps out of that book first? So that way we've got a template. So this is coming out of, like we said, it's coming out of Greg Linville's book, Christmanship. I believe it may be mentioned a little bit in Fundamentals of Sports Outreach as well. A lot of our stuff you can cross-reference and everything like that. But, the first level is the idea of, is the sport biblically defensible based off of the rules that we've got? What is the purpose? What are the rules that we've got? From there, it goes a little bit further. How are those rules implemented? From there, it goes a little bit further. How do players interact with each other? From there, it goes a little bit further into how do coaches interact with the players? How do coaches interact with each other? How do coaches interact with the officials? From there, it goes a little bit further to how do the spectators interact as a whole? And so we go from just looking at the rules to looking at how those rules are implemented. And then from the implementation, we look at each individual level. And if all of these things, or at least the majority of these things, we can say, this is God honoring, or at least it can be God honoring, and it can be redemptive in nature, then we can say that the sport is biblically defensible. So that's just it's a very watered down breakdown. Dr. Linville does a much better job, but he's on vacation. So that at least gives us a little bit of a framework that we're working with here when we're talking about it.
All right, guys. So feel free to respond to that. Is it something based upon what Andrew just mentioned, or something that comes to your mind? Is it a biblically defensible aspect of sports ministry?
I'll jump in. I like to think of the scripture Hebrews 10:25, where we are told to not give up meeting together, as some are in the practice of doing, but rather keep meeting together and encourage one another. I love the idea of fantasy sports being a part of a sports ministry, because in order to not give up meeting together, sometimes you have to start meeting together. And I think this is a great open door, especially for men. Obviously, fantasy sports is not exclusively for men. There are a lot of women that play it. But when you think about meeting together in type of a fellowship type environment, I think that's sometimes something that men struggle with. And if you can give them a non-threatening environment where they can start meeting together, build relationships, it's a great open door to get people one step closer to Jesus. So I think it absolutely is something that you can defend by Scripture, especially as you think about building a fellowship environment amongst people that are meeting together. And there's obviously a lot of strategies that go along with that. I'm sure we'll get to that.
And Ryan, I would add too, it's great to include people of all ages. I've done things with my son. I think it's fun, and the whole family can be a part of it. So yeah, I think that's a great start there for sure. Andre, any thoughts?
Yeah, the only thing that I'd add to that, and that's a great point, just that relational aspect that fantasy football has been through the years. But whenever I think of that question of is it biblically defensible, the only thing that I could find it being dicey as far as, there's some leagues that you put in a lot of money, and you can, so in fact, some of the newer ones, you can have a daily fantasy where you're putting in 10, 20, $30, and some, it borderlines on that gambling and addictive, and just being that good steward of not only your money, but of your time as well. It can get kind of dicey. I hope that we don't approach that line or step over those lines. I know for our leagues, we've put in a small amount, just so that we can get the winner a prize at the end. And I feel like, hey, if you can't afford the entry fee, which ours is $3, okay, the high stakes of $3, we would just waive it. If you can't, and then we just get a prize at the end. And so hopefully we're not approaching some of those, that you're really, it's taking time away from family, it's taking time away from work. It's, it's really, hey, I need to win in order for me to put food on, absolutely gambling can be an addictive and dangerous thing. I think of that Ohio State quarterback, Art Schleister. Now that's an extreme case, but definitely we need to be cautious of that. I don't know if anybody would want to chime in and
yeah, I think absolutely. As far as like a church strategy, keeping the leagues free, or like you say, very minimal fee. A couple of the leagues that I've run at our church, some have been free, some have been minimal fees. So here's an example of what some of our fees went to pay for, like a championship ring for the winner. So obviously it's not like something extravagant, but it's, you pitch in enough that you got something to shoot for. But yeah, I agree with you, Andre. Yeah, you don't want to go down that road, getting people stuck in addictive behaviors. But I think there's some easy guardrails that churches can put up to keep it a fun kind of entry level experience for people to build relationships and have an opportunity to get closer to Jesus.
I think that's part of why we wanted to do this talk, is because this is one of the, we talked last month with the video games as far as the stigma behind it. The fantasy realm of sports has this stigma with it as well. It's there really is no participants. There really are, the rules are set by the commissioner, and they really are just, statistics stuff. So the interaction of the fans basically are the ones where we really got to get into. And, most of where I have implemented this ministry-wise has been more in school settings and local church, but it's also been more wrapped around come March Madness time rather than even the full season. And I know there were parents freaking out that the PE teacher was introducing their 4th grade daughter into gambling because I had her fill out a bracket. And it's like, it took a lot of talks with the parents to understand. It's like, she didn't put any money down. She doesn't even, she picked it based off the colors of the school. There was no, she wasn't going to a bookie and getting information or insider trading here. And the prize is going to be she's going to get a Dairy Queen gift card if she wins. This is not, something horrible. This is just a way for them to interact and to get more interested in what's going on in the sporting world. But just the stigma of the fact that there's, at one point it was all paper and now it's all digital, but the idea of having to watch very closely and the outcome of a game can impact how you do. For a lot of people, the worry is that it's the same thing as going to the racetrack. And, if that horse doesn't win, we're on the street. When it really is nothing more than, like we said before, it's all about this community aspect and being able to come together and just enjoy something that we can all do together with, regardless of whether we are, athletes or we're not. We're all able to join together here and everybody has an equal shot.
So let me there's like 3 conversations going in my mind right now of looking at this. So let me go back this way and say, first of all, first question would be, what are the conversations that you're having as a staff person or a developer of a fantasy league, a fantasy March Madness short-term experience or whatever? What are the conversations and what are the goal markers and what are the red flags that come in those conversations as you build this out? That would be my first question. Andre, you have any?
Yeah, well, I think that I couldn't even tell you what red flags we would have, just because I think that we're all cognizant of, how it could possibly go wrong. And I don't want to be legalistic at all as far as, putting a few dollars here, a few dollars there, and what constitutes as, not being good steward. But as far as some of those markers, definitely building relationship and have an opportunity to be inclusive of some of those fringe, members that just share a similar passion for sports that you do. Might not be able to do it or physically or get involved in some of the sports ministries that we have, or might not have the time for that, but definitely, online, it's something that, they look forward to and have an opportunity to engage with other people in the church. That's definitely a marker. And then the opportunity, and I can share in a little bit of how we do this, but having the opportunity just to encourage people in their faith. Definitely, because there's a captive audience, there's a relationship built there. We've had an opportunity just to encourage people in their faith, both in word and in indeed just interaction. So definitely those are it. I don't know that we've ever won somebody to Jesus Christ, particularly through fantasy football, but definitely that's where it starts, those relationships. And if you look back at we had this conversation down at this Reach gathering. How are we won to Jesus Christ? It was through relationships that were built in all different fashions. This person, because he was coaching this, he really encouraged me in my faith. I wanted to be like so-and-so, and definitely parenting, but it can be all different ways, that this person, was my music teacher, whatever. But those relationships, can have a lasting impact. So definitely relationships and having the opportunity to speak truth and just encouragement in their faith are some of those markers.
Ryan, how about for you?
Yeah, I think as you're building out kind of the framework of what you want your fantasy sports league to look like as it integrates into sports ministry and into the church, being that it is a virtual sport, you could potentially, participate and never meet another person. So I think as churches, you have to be very intentional about building in those touch points. A couple ways that we did this over, the 20 years that we had a fantasy sports league at our church is the draft was always held at the church. So you're inviting people from your community that may not be connected to your church. They're at least getting in your church one time. Throughout the season, we would intentionally schedule like a Monday night football party, again, to bring people together, to gather together, to deepen those relationships. So it's not strictly just a virtual thing. But we would always schedule a Super Bowl party. So again, to give people a chance to gather together, we would give out the awards at the Super Bowl party for the winners of the league. And then somewhere in between, we would also play flag football together. So again, you got to just intentionally build those touch points. So it just doesn't become a virtual experience where you don't really have an opportunity to build some of those lasting relationships. And I'm excited to say that, our league, 20 years, I would be hard pressed to find very many small groups that have lasted that long. that are just strictly people getting together to study the Word. So I think it's an awesome opportunity to bring people together with similar interests, as long as you're intentional about making it more than just a virtual experience.
And going to our, yeah, I was going to say, going to our good friend Bryce Johnson. He over at Unpacking It. He's developed an entire curriculum for exactly what, Ryan and Andre were talking about here, as far as how do we take a virtual sport and make it something that is actual physically happening within community. And so, you guys can find it all at, I think it's unpackingit.com. It's the Fantasy Football Fellowship is the book that he's written. But, one of the things he talks about is that they make it very clear with their leagues that, whoever you're matched up against that week, you're supposed to reach out to them. You guys are supposed to share prayer requests, pray for each other, pray over, whether it's praying over something as simple as, the players that you guys have picked that week, whether it's something more serious as far as a personal thing that's going on. But those kind of touch points that had to be decided from the beginning of, if you're going to commit to playing in this league, then you're also going to commit to fellowship together. And that, the taking it from just, okay, you logged on one time and you got your picks, to, now you're actually in you're basically in a Bible study together. There's weekly devotionals, I think, all these different things that go on, to where it's much more than just you picked your players and now we just see how the season goes. But instead, it's now you guys have come together and now you're in community with each other.
Yeah, those are key. I just think those conversations are good for us as leaders as we go into starting or developing or even reimagining, especially how things have changed a little bit in terms of I know, at least in the state I'm in, like DraftKings is on every other commercial that I see now. So you're having a rise in the variety of those things. And so what are people going to ask us, or what are the questions that we need to be ready to respond to, or whatever? Andrew, I want to go back to the stigma question with you, because we carry a stigma with everything. People have an ideology of it. How do you market, or how do you put out there to draw people into it, and how to debunk the stigma that we may be facing? Is there a key to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did for the Ministry Misfits League this year was we talked about it on the podcast. We talked about it on all of our channels. We just made an open league and just put the links on just about everything that we sent out for 2 or 3 weeks. And then we also realized that our draft date was wrong because the season was starting a week earlier than we thought it was. And so then we had to change everything very quickly. But it was very much just when we presented it out to people, we're like, look, we just want to give everybody a chance, kind of like what Antoine talked about last month with Pastors Game 2, of here's a community where you guys can come. It's going to be laid back. It's just come, fellowship. You guys can talk with us. You guys can submit questions to us. You guys can talk with each other. You guys can, in our case, where it's more of a para-ministry type of setting, we're like, you guys can just, like, my wife signed up and then she doesn't even know what her password is. She hasn't even checked it. And yet I think she's only lost one week so far. And so those sort of things was very much of, we just laid it all out from the beginning of, here it is, come join us. Here it is. When I was doing it within the schools, it was much more of when the kids came in one day after brackets were done, we spent the first 5 minutes and I explained what a bracket was. And so we talked about what tournaments are. We used it as a teaching experience for how leagues are kind of developed and formed. And then they filled it all out. We posted it on the wall. We had a couple other teachers that filled them out too. So now the kids are going to be able to beat the teachers. All those sort of things where the goal for me was always, we want to make this a fun experience and try to let people know, we can do this stuff without needing all the extra garbage that we see thrown in by things like DraftKings, off-track betting, all those other kind of places. So it's been very much more about, we're going to communicate this from an educational standpoint when we're dealing with kids. We're going to introduce this as a community outreach opportunity when we're dealing with adults. And if we're doing intergenerational, then we're just going to have some fun with it and just put it all out there saying, join us if you want. If we've got enough people interested, we may even get a prize pack together. If we don't have a lot of people interested, oh, well, at least the 4 of us that joined can still, go at it for 18 weeks.
Yeah. Andre, how do you go about promoting that and doing that?
Promoting it? Well, we put it in our newsletter and I have a lot of different databases of coaches and families that might be interested in it, and we will send out an email to those families as well, and just say, hey, this is what's going on. This is when the draft is. Here's the registration. Obviously, past years as well as part of that, and then we try to make it open. Like, hey, this is a way to to meet some new people in the church as well every year. In fact, this year we had enough for 2 different leagues. We have a regular Eastpointe league, and then we also had enough fathers and children. I can't say fathers, sons, because there's a daughter that's playing, and so we have a family Eastpointe league, and that's been kind of fun. My son is a part of that, and so we'll talk trash and in fact, he knows those guys better than I do because he plays the Madden football. And I can remember during the draft, we're sitting beside each other and say, I got a chance to take Justin Herbert or Russell Wilson. I'll go with Herbert, or no, that's the guy to take. And first week, Russell, I think, Wilson throws 4 touchdowns and Herbert throws like 1 or something like that. And I was like, I thought you told me to take Herbert. Why did you tell me to take him? He's like, I didn't think you'd actually do it. And so I was like, thanks, son. But he knows those guys better than I do. And it's been fun. Like, he's done it for the last 2 or 3 years. And, it's just a fun way to watch the games together. I always think of that commercial, and I couldn't tell you what they were promoting, but it's a father and son. They get in the car together, and there's just dead silence. And then all of a sudden, the dad says, did you watch the game Sunday? And all of a sudden, the son's eyes just light up. And, sports has the ability to do that, bring relationship and family together. I know that I get a call from my dad every time the Iowa Hawkeyes win a big game, and I look forward to that. And sometimes I'm the one that's calling him, but sports has the ability to do that, and fantasy football has the ability to do that as well, and not just fathers and sons and family, but anyone that has that interest in the game. I don't know if I answered your question or not, Greg. I think it was on promoting I think I've shared those stories whenever hey, you should get involved in this, though.
I think there's some unique different ways that you can promote and market a sports fantasy league that will help accomplish a couple different things. Imagine if you can get people beyond just your sports ministry that are on staff involved. What if you can get your senior pastor involved with it? Think about senior pastors in most churches today. Most of them, when you get to the larger size churches, they're hard to get a touch point with. Oftentimes their emails won't even be listed on websites. They're almost untouchable. So what if you can get like a senior pastor, different pastors from different ministries involved in a fantasy sports league and say, hey, see if you can beat our senior pastor in this fantasy sport, whatever the sport may be. I just think it is a fun way to get people to interact that normally wouldn't have an opportunity to interact with other people, expose people to different people on the staff. And it's a fun way to, I think, to just bring people together under under the umbrella of friendly competition. So I think that's a fun way that you could market it and get maybe people interested that wouldn't necessarily be interested, because I think we've mentioned this before too, but a fantasy sports experience like this is something that transcends gender, age, ability. It's all inclusive. It's probably one of the only sports experiences that truly is a fully inclusive type opportunity.
Just to piggyback on that, currently our senior pastor is leading the Eastpointe League, and so I try to make mention every week. I'll send out an email, and just to have that name or that recognition through the Eastpointe Mail. And
maybe he just has an admin doing it who knows nothing about the game, and it's just lucky points every week. You know how that goes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, and even with that, going into what everybody just said, even with what you were talking about there, Greg, is that the nice thing with the way that especially online fantasy sports now is set up is that, this is one, I guess this kind of goes back to the first question you asked, Greg, as far as the process of planning out and everything like that. But there are so many different opportunities and ways to do drafts now that you don't have to know anything. You don't have to know the players. You don't even have to know what a football is to be able to do it and be able to do well. One of the things that Dwight McDowell and I talked about is both of the league that he runs and the league that the Misfits are doing, because we've got so many people from so many different areas of the country and across the world capable of being able to join us. There's no way to do a live draft. There's no way to do it. So we set it up, and because both Coach Dwight and I are much more of a strategic mindset for athletics, we actually think it's more fun to do it this way. But, we set it up where it's an auto pick. You don't even get to pick your players. You find out who you have the morning of game one, and then you set the trade limits to no limits. There's no salary cap, no nothing like that. And so you at that point have to trade, make the right decisions to decide who you keep, who you go after, what's a good trade. You can get real good opportunities. You can get some real bad opportunities. You were just talking about the whole Herbert thing with your son there, Andre. My co-host ended up with Herbert and Nick Chubb, and I ended up with both Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, and tried to trade him Brady for Chubb, because it's a decent, and he wouldn't do it. So if you're listening to this, Brandon, I'm still open to the trade if you really want it, because Herbert's not helping you at all. But there's a lot of different ways to do this. It doesn't have to be where everybody's in the room together. It doesn't have to be where everybody's on Zoom together. It can be something as simple as come sign up, know what you're doing, and then we'll see you week one. There's no homework that has to be involved, anything like that.
So you talk about just in this scenario, I've heard some concept of target groups without calling out target groups. So this leads me to ask this question, because based on how you can build it, set it up, and anybody can play in it, do you build it for recreational mindset? Do you build it for a different level of competition? Do you build it for, is there a tier system in which you do a target ministry off of the different systems? Or how would you, have you done that, or would you do something like that? Anybody can.
I would say it's up to this goes back to the mission vision stuff as far as the strategic relevance for your church. If you're, like in Dan's situation where he's in a church plant scenario, he's probably going to be better off going into where let's just open this up and see who joins. Guys like, Ryan, who this league's been going on for 20 years, he's probably better off, just targeting either, specific individuals, or setting up where you can do the tiers like what Andre's talking about as far as the Eastpointe League and then the Family League. There's a wide range. It's all going to depend on what the goal is for your church. We talked about this with the video game stuff also, as far as if you're going to try to bring this into your local church setting, you've got to know why you're doing it. And if you don't know why you're doing it, you probably shouldn't be doing it. There's plenty of other opportunities for you to be able to join a league elsewhere. If you don't know why you want to bring this into your church, you're probably better off just going and joining another league elsewhere.
Yeah. I'm curious, Ryan, after 20 years, you're giving rings out. At some point, you got to be handing bust. I mean, when does it cross over from rings to bust?
It's been a lot of fun, and like I said, I've managed several different leagues, and not all of them have prizes. Some are strictly for fun and fellowship. Others of them are more competitive. So, like, kind of going back to your question is, what are you trying to accomplish? If there are people that are interested in a more competitive league and environment, set that up for them, because you don't want to have somebody that's super aggressive and competitive playing with someone who's never played before, because it could get really annoying for a lot of different reasons. So I think if you're intentional in how you set things up, I think it can accomplish a lot of good things. So I'll give one example of something from this past season. I didn't join this league, but I was invited to a league started by a guy in our disability ministry at First Christian Church. So here's the guy with intellectual developmental disabilities that wanted to start his own fantasy football league to create an environment for not only his friends, but also people outside of this friendship group to create opportunities for inclusion and to create opportunities for people to get to know each other. So I was really proud of him for setting that up. I just didn't have the ability to join one more league. Again, like Andrew said, if think about your vision, what are we trying to accomplish here? A fantasy league can accomplish a lot, even inclusion when it comes to people with disabilities and people that don't have disabilities, because I think a lot of times in our arena, it's people shy away from interacting with people with disabilities just because of the fear of the unknown. They're like, I don't know what I would talk about. But you put them in a fantasy sports arena, you've got something to talk about that you have in common, and you can break down some of those irrational fears. So it's a great opportunity as long as you know what your vision is, your mission, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
There are also a couple of ways to prevent, even like what Ryan was talking about, as far as some experienced players overrunning, the rest of your leagues. If you know how fantasy sports work as a commissioner, you can actually set your league up to where you decide what gets what points. So like one of the things that I've always known is typically with a lot of fantasy football leagues, if you get the top quarterback, you're going to win most of your matchups because they're getting 40 points while everybody else is getting 5 or 10. So one of the things we did within Misfits without telling anybody was I took the passer points down and upped the running points. And so now the quarterback is on the same par as everybody else. And if you don't have a good running game, or as far as your running backs, you're not going to be able to win. And there were a couple of guys that joined the league that didn't look at the scoring system. And so they immediately traded off, big name running guys to get a bigger name quarterback. And then after week one, and they didn't even hit 100 points, suddenly they were crawling back asking for their trades back because they just didn't check. So there are ways to kind of handicap it and keep it more competitive. And sometimes that can also be fun when, it actually is going to hurt the guys that are more experienced and actually allow people without the same experience level to be able to thrive. And then that gets them excited and wanting to invite their friends the following year.
Yeah. So when you look at this, I don't know if there's a percentage, a non-percentage, when you look at your goals or your next steps, does it fall more? It's up to the goals, really, whether you want to be more fellowship oriented or outreach oriented. Over the years, Ryan, you've had 20 years in this. Kind of, how's the balance been of the outreach and the inreach process there for you?
I think our leagues have always been kind of heavy fellowship oriented. There have been a few seasons where we had somebody step up as a volunteer that was writing devotionals that we sent out weekly to all the teams, which was really cool because I mean, at the peak of our leagues, I mean, we had about maybe 8 different leagues going on at the same time under the same umbrella. So to be able to kick out that many devotionals to a bunch of guys that not all of them attended our church, and over the years, some of them fell away from the church, but stayed in those relationships. So just again, to have a touch point with somebody that may not be connected in the church anymore was super, super helpful. But yeah, we were heavy on the fellowship end of things.
Andre, how about you over your experiences?
Say that question again.
Just curious, over the years, the percentage of outreach, in-reach, more fellowship, more focused to use it as a target community, or just take whatever you get in between?
Yeah, I'd say there's a good balance. There's been several through the years that, just, hey, I'm here because I was invited by this friend, and just the opportunity to get to know him. But then there's also been some that have been a part of it every year in, year out, and it's just been fun to, a fun way to connect each week. And just going back to the youth, it's been great having youth involved as well every week. Whenever they come into, our Sunday school class or in the youth groups, we have something to talk about. How'd your fantasy team do this week? Or, hey, I'm playing you this week. How come you started this guy or didn't start this guy, or this guy's doing this? And so I'd say, it's been a balance for sure.
Yeah, based on the use of technology, you're going to have to back that down to like third graders can start playing now, the way they can handle the devices and set things up. It's a whole next generation ministry. Yeah.
And it's funny too that going back to what Andrew was saying about, making sure that the competitive level is similar. I really believe fantasy football is kind of a great equalizer. There's definitely guys that can put a little more time into it that are going to probably do a little bit more. Like this week, I didn't check my lineup on Sunday, and so I didn't start Dalvin Cook, or I did start Dalvin Cook, and he didn't even play. And so I do that all the time, and so there is definitely good owners and bad owners, but we make fun of one guy because he won it one year. One year he won it, and he's really into it, but he couldn't make it to the draft, so he sent his wife to draft for him, and that was the year that he won. So we made a rule that you're not allowed to have your wife draft for you anymore, and so we laugh about that all the time. And fantasy sports has been that. I've been involved been running them for 20 some years, and I've won one time. Law of averages just say I gotta win more than that, but I don't.
That reminds me, my old evangelism professor always said, you gotta love fishing more than you do catching.
Yeah.
Right? You gotta love playing more than you do winning on certain areas like that. So
yeah, exactly. And I enjoy whenever, I don't get to watch many Sunday afternoon games. It's just a busy day for me with church and then youth groups in the evening. But if you have somebody on the Sunday night or Monday night game, it makes it a lot more fun to watch for sure, those games and interact with others. So, yeah.
In our remaining time, I think it'd be really good for us to kind of talk through some practical resources. You guys have done a great job thinking through an overall strategy to get people to belong before they believe. It's part of our 5B process with CSRM. But let's start thinking about very practical resources, both for curriculum and then even how to run a league. Let's say there's people who are watching this right now or who will watch it later that are thinking, I don't even know where to start. So, and it could be in our country, it could be in other countries. What resources are out there? What resources would you recommend? And also, what resources have you used? Ryan, we'll start with you. Any practical resources that you want to share?
I think any of your sports devotional type Bibles that are out there, that I'm sure many of you in the sports ministry world have, you probably have 3 or 4 of them on your bookshelf. I think a lot of those are great and can easily be used, whether you're sending out a weekly email devotional, or you're doing like a video type message for your league. I mean, obviously, if we want to share Jesus, that's what it's all about, and this is an avenue to do that. So I don't know that they're, I'm sure some of you have other, specific fantasy football, sports type of thing, Bible type of things, but I think any sports devotional Bible would be a great place to start when it comes to finding materials to share on a weekly basis with the members of the league.
Ryan, tell us too, also running an actual league, what resources have you used there as, a different, it could be fantasy football, could be any sport really, but what resources would you recommend?
I found that traditionally we've used ESPN leagues, fantasy sports leagues. They seem to be super user friendly. They won't give you as many things that you can adapt and tweak. Maybe like My Fantasy League is another resource. My Fantasy League, Fantasy Football League is a good one. But we've usually gone with ESPN just because of its user friendliness. Again, less options to customize. But I found it to be a good platform for people that most people would be able to access, and it's free. That's usually the optimal word. As you're a commissioner, you want to avoid paying fees for a platform. That's always a good thing, because it's less money that you're going to have to ask other people to cover, or for you to cover individually.
And that's a great resource there. You use the keyword free. And I would say, if you're thinking about starting anything in your church, and you might look around, you're like, well, we don't have a gym, we don't have a fellowship hall, I don't even know where to start. This could be a very easy way for you to begin some sort of sports outreach and make it free. And just try something. I would also throw this in because I know guys like Andre, you do a great job with themes for your different leagues and stuff like that. If you're already doing that for a basketball league, why not transition that over to a fantasy league? Make it easy on yourself with the curriculum, with the themes, with the Bible verses that you already are using for a camp or a league, so that this can be another arm of your ministry, a strategy where you're not crushing yourself trying to come up with something, especially if you already have it. So, Andre, let's turn to you next. Tell us about some resources that you use to run your fantasy leagues.
Yeah, it's already been mentioned, but this book, Fantasy Football Fellowship, Bryce Johnson, picked that up years ago, and what I've used this for is that there's a devotion for every week of the season that just kind of goes along with that, and I've used what the theme of that season. I've tried to make it somehow personal, whatever illustration he's had. I know that it'll touch, a little broader if I use something that's going on in my life, or something I've seen in the church, or something like that. And I've just used that as a base. And then we also, along with that devotional, I've tried to include each of the players in some way, and hey, here's what the standings are. Here's the top player for this week and whose team they are. Here's the game of the week, and try to take whatever game was really close, or it was between two of the top teams, and just give a little recap, something really, really short. I think this week, Samantha J lost by less than a point because she had the, what was it? Who'd the Packers play? Oh, San Francisco. She had the 49ers defense, and they gave up that last second field goal, and it took them into another bracket. And so I just shared something like that along with it. And then I also started this year, worst coaching move of the week. And so I take who's ever on the bench who had the most points, and it's just something fun. I got the worst coaching move of the week this week with Dalvin Cook in my starting lineup. And, just something fun, that hopefully that people will laugh, not take too seriously. Although I've already got an email. I put down that so-and-so worst coaching move of the year, that I think it was Brandon Cooks was on the bench. And I got an email from one of the ladies in the draft. He was in my starting lineup. Here's proof. And I said, no, it was from the other league that coaching move happened. You were the smart coach that put him in. This other owner did not. So anyways, that's, again, this resource here. We use ESPN as well. It's free, and it's been really easy to use, and the draft's gone good. So
I think I would have won the worst coaching decision award every week so far, because Tom Brady is on my bench every week. But, he's not hurting me if he's, sitting on my bench. He can't hurt me. So,
yeah, he's found the fountain of youth.
Yeah.
I want to dive in.
Oh, go for it, Dan.
I want to dive in real quick because, Andre, you mentioned your weekly emails. Now, do you use the ESPN feature there, like your chat feature for your league, or do you create something separate? How do you communicate with those?
Whenever they register, we have a database here at the church, Church Community Builder, that they'll form if they don't have a profile already, and then they'll go into a group. Hey, here's everyone that's in fantasy football, and they'll receive an email through that. I don't go through the ESPN app. They get an email whenever we do that weekly.
Cool. And that's another great feature. If people do register, if your church does have a database, I know sometimes those can be expensive too, but if your church does have one and people sign up for that league, especially if they're not connected to your church, well, now you have their email, right? And now you can send them different things. And then maybe a part of your strategy is, all right, when the fantasy football season is over, well, we have a Christmas Eve service, and that database should include marketing, so to speak, about your Christmas Eve service. Just an overall strategy there. I think that'd be really good. Andrew, tell us about resources that you have used in some of your terrible coaching moves.
I'm 3-0, so I wouldn't say I have very many terrible coaching moves. So yeah, other than unpacking it, like we already talked about, Fantasy Football Fellowship, I use ESPN this year. This is the first year I've used it. And at first I was like, this is going to be horrible because it was giving us a ton of problems for people trying to join. But we've kind of figured it out now. And now that we know, we'll have more time to help people get signed up for next year with it. But, one other resource that is not necessarily fantasy football focused, but that can help you with doing this is, go looking for, NFL chaplains and follow them on Twitter. Find out what they're doing, get stories from them. A good friend of mine who used to be on staff here with CSRM, also Garrett Price, he is huge within the fantasy football world. Follow him at Dynasty Price. He's a part of Dynasty Nerds, which is like I don't know what they're ranked anymore, but they're in the top 10 as far as fantasy football podcasts. He also writes for a fantasy football blog. His Twitter account, though, he also uses, he's had to take a break a little bit this year, but most years he does a weekly faith and football focus on there as well. He also shares some fantasy tips and tricks because, that's his job, but he also does a good job of highlighting stories that's coming out of the NFL. Other guys, Dr. Derwin Gray, he was a linebacker for a while. Now he's a pastor. Real big within the multi-ethnic church movement, but he still is very active within athletics as well. And he's always sharing tips, stories from his playing days, things like that. Steve Connor, who we just released an interview with him on Ministry Misfits this morning. He'll be coming out on the CSRM podcast here soon. A lot of his stuff, he shares stories in Rugged Discipleship about how, coaches came alongside him in his playing career. Finding those kind of stories and highlighting them are a very good opportunity, one for you and your sports ministry to be able to show parents, show players. It's like, even if you want to go far within this sport, it doesn't mean that you have to disassociate yourself from your faith. And two, it also gives you a bunch of resources and material to be able to show whether it's your leadership team, whether it's investors, whoever it is, coaches, players, you're able to show them, look, there's a much larger community than just our sports ministry, than just, us associated with CSRM or the Reach Gathering, but there's a huge movement of athletes that are already doing this, huge movement of pastors that volunteer their time to go and minister to these people and these players. It's a nice way to be able to kind of broaden the scope a little bit just from your little tiny league to this is much bigger than that, both in terms of fantasy football and in terms of gospel ministry. This is a much bigger movement than we probably realize.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of resources out there. Try to drop some just from what you guys said there in the chat box to pick up on. But if you have any questions on those things, you can always just contact CSRM and chime in on a variety of networks that are out there and experiences that can point in a variety of different directions of different discipleship paths and target groups across the board there. So check the website out or just email CSRM and get in contact with that. So as we come to a close in our conversation today, certainly a good way to network with people and have fun with it. Ryan, last thoughts in terms of today's conversation?
Can I ask the question?
Yes. Go ahead, Stephen. Ask a question.
Yeah, I want really appreciate very much, and I want to find out how first football that you have mentioned, all those resources. As you know, in Africa, that is the sport to bring the people, unify the people together, and it is much more easier to do the discipleship. And I would love to be part of that. And how should I get the resources in as far as to see that those resources reaching out to the community? It is, I discovered that this is the best and the easiest way to, as you said, to have the fellowship, as you know, and a sport to bring the people together, which we speak one language in Africa. And I hope and trust that I really, really appreciate your resources, as you mentioned, and I want to find out how best I can be part of that and how best I can. So get the resources and start off, especially the fantasy football that you have mentioned.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in from the CSRM perspective here. See, one thing I would recommend for you would be, we go to the CSRM website, you can get the information there, but get a hold of Bradley Barnes. He's going to be able to direct you to pretty much everything related to Africa, but more specifically for you, American football probably isn't going to go far. But there is a movement of fantasy football from a soccer perspective that is growing. I don't know if ESPN offers it yet, but I know there are a few. Yahoo, I believe, still does. Honestly, FIFA probably, if you go to their website, would be able to direct you to some different resources for that as well. Between Bradley. Between hopefully some of the stuff we talked about here, you should be able to find something that would be usable there in Zambia, in addition to just the stuff we're doing here.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much.
Yep, very good. And I just sent you a little direct message about Bradley Barnes and that. So very good, good question there.
Yeah, I didn't quite get the question, but I suppose just piggybacking off of what Andrew said was that sports is a great connector. I know that down in Haiti, we couldn't speak the language, and so we would interact, bonjour, bonsoir, and then we would say a soccer player's name, Messi or Ronaldo, and then all of a sudden we made a connection point, all right? And see, just like that, I see a smile, Ronaldo or Messi, which one is better? And we would have these debates about which one was better. And so that's what, that's kind of the basis of fantasy sports right there, is your players that you picked better than his players that he picked. And, on a weekly basis, you can have that conversation. And then all of a sudden, boom, who knows where that conversation or that relationship's going to go. So
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the resources.
So who is better, Ronaldo or Messi? Did you understand that?
To me, as I'm a coach, I coach soccer. I'm really involved in soccer, so I look at the gift, the ability of Messi. So to me, I look at the Messi who is naturally talented. I put on training, but not as much as Ronaldo. I think of he do much. He do much of the practicing, and the Messi just comes out naturally. Adding to the training. So to me, I think Messi is more natural in as far as soccer is concerned.
Good.
Yo.
Yeah. Don't.
So
I guess I can say this. Don't bet against.
Okay. That's why the internet sometimes is cutting here and there.
Yeah. Very good. All right, Ryan. Any last closing thoughts?
Two things. One is for Andrew, and then one's for everybody. Just a reminder: Tom Brady goes back to New England this week, so get him in your starting lineup.
Oh, I already made the switch. Don't worry.
Okay. So, because you're going to want to get those vengeance points.
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just one bit of advice there. The other thing for everybody is when you're thinking about fantasy sports as a part of your sports ministry, really capitalize on the fact that it truly is an inclusive opportunity to bridge the gap between gender, between ability, between age. It's really one of the only things that can bring all people together under one sports environment. So I just encourage you, think inclusively, think all different people groups. When you bring everyone together, everybody wins as you build those relationships. So think inclusive with this specific opportunity.
Andrew?
Yeah, I would say just in addition to what Ryan's talking about there of, if you're going inclusive with your audience, then make sure you're inclusive with your staff also. This is an easy ministry integration point to get, if you've got kids in the league, get your children's pastor on there. If it's a youth league, make sure the youth pastor is in there and talking trash to the kids. And even though that sounds like a joke, I'm 100% serious. If your youth pastor is not trash talking your kids in the fantasy league, then you're doing it wrong. Those sort of things go a long way towards turning this from just a fun thing of we all get together and do this to where now all of a sudden we're seeing major culture changes within our churches for the better. We talked about it last month with the video games. It's the same thing here of if we are not doing ministry together within our churches and not all working towards the same vision and all willing to do what we need to, then it's not worth the money, it's not worth the time, and it's not worth the stress.
Andre, how about you?
I just be careful about starting Tom Brady this week. I heard that Belichick had 7 spies at their practice this week, and he knows the game plan already. So be careful, Andrew, about starting Tom Brady.
You're not even in the league. You have nothing to worry about. You didn't respond to my email, so.
Oh, did I get an email to be in that league? I can barely. I did try to do a couple leagues one year, and it was just. I couldn't even keep track. Yeah, I'm lucky to get one.
All right, Dan. Well, we got a few resources. We got some conversation in regards to biblically defensible ideologies and how do we put those into play with this and create boundaries or market or stigmas, and what are some resources there and goals. I think it always goes back to relationship, and it goes back to the why. Yep. And then you build out from there. And certainly we heard those kind of things in a variety of ways. So your last thoughts as we finish up today?
Yeah, I think it's so encouraging to hear from all these conversationalists about these are very specific things that we can use in our strategies to reach people, to make more disciples, to be more inclusive. I love the things that Ryan just shared there. And there's tons of resources. And what I love about this too, Stephen brought up some questions. This is something that can translate really anywhere in the world as fantasy sports continues to grow. Very specifically in other countries, soccer is just huge. So these are definitely some avenues that we can use in order to help our sports ministries grow, expand, even start something. And I mentioned a few different times, maybe you don't know where to start. This could be your very easy answer of where to start, especially if you have a good strategy going into it. So we just want to encourage you, don't be afraid to reach out to any of the conversationalists who have spoken to you today. I'm sure through the recording, there'll be some information on how to contact them. If not, check out their churches or their ministries. And if you need their information and can't find it, just reach out to one of us at CSRM. We'll be happy to get you in touch with them. And just thank you to the conversationalists. We look forward to the next Tuesday talk, which is always the last Tuesday of the month. And so that'll be in October. And I'm looking up the exact date right now, October the 26th. And we will be talking about evangelistic disciple making. A lot of times we want to say, well, it's evangelism and it's discipleship. Well, why not have them both together as our strategy? So we'll be talking about that next month, same time. And just want to thank everybody. I'll close us out in prayer. And if you want to watch this recording, it'll come out next Wednesday. And be sure to share it with those who may benefit from it. So, all right, I'll close us out in prayer here. Father, I do thank you. Lord, thank you that we can be super creative. Lord, there's a lot of things that we can use, Father, to make sure that we're doing our best to reach all people. And Father, the last 2 months, I've been very encouraged because, Father, there's very traditional ways to go about having camps and leagues. And Father, we want to keep doing that for sure. But there's some other ways, God, leveraging technology and resources on video games and now fantasy sports, God, that just are really exploding in our culture. And Father, we want to redeem that for something good. We want to use that for something good. And so, Father, right now, may you put on our hearts and minds people who are disconnected from our churches and from our church services and even our sports ministries. Father, help us to leverage this as a way to connect with them, to build those relationships that we heard many different times. And Father, to see them move from a fantasy league to hopefully our worship services, and then hopefully into a small group, and hopefully to truly become a fully dedicated follower of Christ. So God, give us creative ways to go about all this. We pray this movement will be something that could expand beyond our country, beyond even just a mega church, even to smaller churches that don't feel like they have a lot of resources. I pray we could use this as a great strategy. Lord, I pray you bless everyone who's been on this recording, for those who will hear it later. And Father, may you continue to expand your kingdom through sports, rec, and fitness ministries. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Tuesday Talks are a production of CSRM and their video production house, Overwhelming Victory Flix. Dr. Greg Linville is our executive producer, and Andrew Fouts is the associate producer. To find out more about Tuesday Talks or to join our next discussion live, visit overwhelmingvictory.org/Tuesday Talks. To find out more about Cool Spring Baptist Church, visit coolspring.org. And to learn more about CSRM, visit csrm.org.